All right, now we are ready to start sketching. So I've settled on these 4 different arrangements that I've, experimented with to find the composition within my still life. And now I'm looking at my still life and drawing it to see how it works in the 2-dimensional sphere on our paper. So I'm going to start here with this landscape orientation and try the glasses and the ink holder and pen. And I'm gonna try that combination, that grouping of items in landscape and portrait. And then I'm gonna try my computer and book grouping of items both in landscape and portrait, because these are, all about experimenting, finding out what works before starting on your canvas to get the best composition before you spend a lot of time painting. So we're really thinking about simple outlines. So let's see here. I'm getting just the simple lines of these glasses in. First, before I spend too much time on that, I'm gonna think about where the table starts. And it's definitely less than halfway. So I'm going to think about it here and kind of see if that makes sense, because that's going to place everything in space. And then that means the glasses need to be down a little bit. Maybe the table comes up more. Let's see. I'm going to move the table up here a little more. So I have room for all my items. So thinking about where everything is in relation to the other things, and thinking about what this angle might be. And then see, have the nose piece here, and this is going both, we see the background through it, and this one's going to be bigger because it's closer to us. So I'm just making really simple shapes, not getting any detail, because I want to make sure everything is in the right place. And this is this old ink holder of my great-grandmother's. And I want to make sure that there's enough room for the pen, because that's an important part of my composition. And so I'm thinking about where the edge of this is. And maybe, did I make the glasses too big? See, this is where you can work things out and you can easily erase, instead of if you started just trying to paint this right away, which is a legitimate way to draw, to paint, but it's harder to make changes. So I'm gonna make the glasses like one big shape like this, because I'm getting confused with all the circles. So sometimes just drawing straight lines is helpful. And this is like really in perspective. So it's this kind of shape. That's helping me a little more. And then I have like a circle here, a circle here, and the triangle shape of the pen is here. So I know I draw really light. That's why I'm using the 5B, but it's hard for me to draw dark lines right away. So I'll get it as dark as possible. Okay, and then this is the bottom. This is where the glasses kind of end, and then that connects to this. And then this part of the inkwell goes over the edge of the table. So let me get the edge of the table in the right place. The table's down lower like I thought at first. Okay. This kind of curves up. And I didn't make this easy for myself, because circles in perspective like this are ovals, or ellipses. Circles in perspective are ellipses. And they can be, this is wider and flatter. And see how with the pencil I can take my time and really, I'm working out so much here. Like, I've looked at this object so many times, it's on my desk, but this is the first time I'm ever drawing it. So it really has a lot more going on than I realized. So when you're choosing your objects, make sure you choose stuff that is both interesting to paint and draw, but that's not gonna make you go cuckoo with all the detail. Okay, and this is coming through here. And then we have the cork part of the pen. This is another oval. And as I'm drawing this, I'm like, oh man, I don't know if I want to paint this. I don't know. You know, you're seeing the details of it and you're seeing what's gonna work for a painting. And I'm thinking it could be cool to paint. I like the symbolism of it, but it could also be kind of annoying to paint. So I'm also thinking about, what do I want to spend my time painting? Okay, so this is enough to start to get these outlines of where things will be on the canvas and working out, you know, I'm looking at the still life, but I need to get it from a 3-dimensional thing that I'm seeing in life to actually 2 dimensions and how it's gonna look on the canvas. So you're organizing your composition when you're doing it 3-dimensionally in life, and then you're also arranging your composition 2-dimensionally when you're drawing it on the canvas. I'm gonna try this overhead view of the 3 objects and see how I feel about that. And you kind of don't, even if it might look awesome in person as a still life, but when you're drawing it, you might realize, oh, this is not gonna work on a 2-dimensional canvas. So this is why we take the time to do these composition thumbnail sketches. They're also called preparatory drawings. You might hear that, preparatory drawings, from art schools call them that sometimes. Okay, I'm gonna start here with the pen because that's kind of like, I'm thinking about where it starts and ends. So I'm gonna draw like a little dot where I want it to start and a little dot where I want it to end. And I think that's the right angle, but it might not be. And then the glasses are like at a less of an angle here. And I'm just doing this thing again for the glasses to fit them kind of in an envelope, we call it sometimes, or like kind of outline the big shape of the glasses. And then the ink well. Circles, circles, 3 circles. Only 2 of them are in perspective here, so that's nice. I have the one that's not in perspective. A little easier to draw. Okay, so quickly I'm getting down the simple shapes of the composition and getting them in place. And when you draw them like this, you know, you can, without too much detail, then you can move stuff around if it's not in the right place. But I think that's pretty good. I think this probably goes out longer. Okay, so now I'm going to add just a little more detail, just to, because I'm not really sure how I feel about this composition yet, so I want to think about it a little more. Find what works for me. I see the cork part of this is starting after the edge of the inkwell, so I'm always making those comparisons, and it's getting wider. And then the pen nib is kind of at an angle, so I'm gonna draw a center line, and then we see less of the top and more of the bottom, I think, because it's like a little turn to the side. Barely, and then it has a little, you know, this stuff for holding the ink. I mean, this could be fun to paint. I'm always thinking that because there's like the texture of the cork, the texture of the metal and the glass. Metal and glass are 2 really difficult things to paint. So if you want a challenge, that's good. But if you know, always think about where you are in your artistic journey, right? You want to challenge yourself enough so you're learning and you're in that learning zone where you're just a little bit outside of your comfort zone. So you're learning new things, but you don't want to challenge yourself too much where you get like frustrated and want to give up. So you know where you're at and where what feels right for you. So give yourself like the appropriate challenge for where you are in your ability and your learning. You know, if you're just starting, you don't want to do metal and glass because it's going to be so annoying and it's not going to look the way you want it to look and you're going to get frustrated and want to give up. So do something a little more simple and work your way up to the more complicated, advanced stuff. I think that's how learning works the best. I'm just adding, if you want to add in any shading, you can do like these lines like that, so you don't have to take the time to shade in. I forgot this little top of it back here, and this could be interesting to paint. I'm not totally sure. I don't know if I want to paint my glasses. I'm realizing they're very dirty and I should probably clean them, but they're always smudged and... Okay, so there's two, and now I'm gonna try some different arrangements here. So I'm gonna do the landscape of the books and the computer. Okay, so again here, this one didn't have like a horizon line or a table line to ground it because it was looking down on it. So this is about halfway. I'm thinking about where the table is. And I'm just doing this to kind of give my eye, you can draw it all the way across, but to kind of break up the space. Okay, the laptop is on the table. So you have to make sure the back of it is not going off the table or it's gonna look like it's falling off, right? So this part of it, and I'm thinking about what these angles are. And it's in all kinds of perspective. This is why taking a drawing class helps with painting. And I know these can seem, time consuming, but I promise that they end up saving time because you're figuring out all the compositional issues here in this simple drawing. And you're rearranging stuff. You're setting yourself up to make a painting that you feel good about. And so when you get to the canvas, because you're going to pick one of these and paint them next week on the canvas, when you get to the canvas, you'll feel confident that you know what your composition is and you can really focus on the painting part of it. Where this preparatory drawing is focusing on the composition and the layout part of it. And when you get to the painting, then you can focus on your painting techniques and don't have to worry about what the composition is. Sorry, sometimes talking and drawing isn't so easy. I'm just trying to, this seems simple, but it is not always the most simple. These rectangles. Okay, this is more foreshortened, I think, because I'm noticing here is that the table comes out of the book here. So then I think my computer has to be lower. This edge is coming out of here. And then okay. I think that's it. And then this goes back a little bit. It's a very foreshortened, but we're seeing a little bit at the top of that book. And then this book, I'm looking at the distance between like where the table ends, the wall, and then how this book is. And this could be really fun to paint. These different textures of the leather of the books, the metal of the computer is a challenge, and there's glass in it too. Why did I do this to myself? You can choose more simple things. So for these strings I think are an important part of the composition. So I'm just gonna draw one line to represent them, but I do think they do a lot for the composition. And I think they kind of draw your eye into it. And so this is even more foreshortened because now I'm looking at this space. I want more of this space. So I need to foreshorten that laptop even more. And think about this space here. And then I have some strings coming out of here. So I like the way these strings create like a triangle shape. And triangles are a very strong compositional element. And so I think having this triangle on the bottom, and then there's almost another triangle-ish thing happening here. That's great compositionally. Okay, what's happening with this guy? This is all kinds of foreshortened. So it's coming up here, but it's getting wider. What's this angle? Okay, and I can adjust this as, you know, I can always open and close my laptop screen. Okay, I'm just gonna make a notion for the keyboard, where the keyboard goes, and it's back here more. A lot of foreshortening and perspective here. So that's another thing to think about, how much you want to challenge yourself. And there is a significant shadow back here, so I might just represent that with a couple lines to think about where my shadow shapes and my light is coming from, you know, because that just like, I'm kind of making almost visual notes where, you know, this is where you work out your ideas, you refine the composition. I'm studying the composition. So I'm kind of creating like a shorthand or a note system. And one of them is like just these lines quickly can represent a shadow. All right, let's look at the portrait orientation of these objects, the computer and the books, the sketchbooks. Okay, I'm gonna start with the table again because that's kind of like my grounding feature. And there's a little bit of space on the bottom. And then we see the side of the table with this drawer. Sorry, drawer is a hard word for me with the New York accent because I want to say drawer, but I know that's not how you say it. It's not a drawer. It's a drawer. Sorry. Okay, and the knob in here, which I actually really like because it kind of has like a fun spiral. That this is a kind of element that you could like exaggerate if it's something that you like. And then this wood texture is awesome. I just love drawing and painting old wood textures. So this is an old piece from my grandparents that I use as my desk. Okay, let's see. A well-used piece of wood furniture. I think the top of the desk is here, but I think I might start with the sketchbooks this time instead of the laptop because I have the biggest sketchbook on top and then they kind of make steps, these interesting steps, and then the one on the bottom is intersected with the table. You see how I'm always making these kind of comparisons. Where's the table in relation to this sketchbook? And that's how we're figuring out how it's sitting in space. And then of course, we've got all the weird angles going on to make our lives interesting. So the bottom of the laptop, it has to be sitting on the table. So I don't want to mess that up. And I see the corner here. I'm looking at my, you know, you're purposely setting stuff up and the knob of the draw here is lined up with the corner. So sometimes I just make like a little dot and then I'm like connecting the dots. So this is the laptop and it's super foreshortened because if the table is here, then it's coming back. It's going that way. What is that angle? Okay, it's going like that. And then we're thinking super foreshorten this funny angle because this is going to be like this. And I can adjust this angle on my computer as much as I want. Even though this one has complicated angles, I like the symbolism of it. I like that the computer's a little more closed, like it's almost eating my poor sketchbooks, that it's eating up my time, my drawing time. So I feel like it works for the symbolism. And then I also really like these elements of the wood with the metal and the leather. It is a lot of brown, so nothing wrong with that. Brown is one of my favorite neutrals to work with because it can go warm, it can go cool, you know, so it'll be fun to work with all those different shades of brown and the wood and the leather. And then I think the black of the laptop screen can be a really cool tone contrast, like metallic and cool grays and blacks. Almost purple it goes into here with the reflection of the brown is almost creating some purples. Okay, this string coming down is a big part of the composition that I want to be thinking about because it's hitting the edge and then floating down this way. So that's really leading our eye. And I think I might do the thing with like this one's kind of coming straight out, but I'm going to move it, you know, make your artistic license choices. And you can adjust the way these angles are to make some interesting shapes here. So we have some triangle shapes. I think I like this one. There's a shadow back here. So now you're taking the time to look at each of your sketches, figure out what works for you and what you want to paint. So again, you know, find yourself in the learning zone. Give yourself a bit of a challenge, but not so much of a challenge that you're going to get frustrated and want to give up. So think about where you are in your skill level, and find what works for you, find what you want to put on the canvas for the next part of the project.